Joining me now on Executive Exchange on Moneyweb TV is Mteto Nyati, who is the chairman of Eskom. Thank you very much for your time, Mteto. I was told recently that you had second thoughts about accepting the position as Eskom chair back in 2023. Is there truth to that statement, sir?
No, I think what I can say is that I had to reflect when the president asked me to take the job. I had to reflect on it. First, I had to ask myself, is this something that I can do? So that's the first thing. The second thing is I am at a particular point in my life now. I wanted to check whether is this something that is in line with where I am, And when I looked at all of that, plus he wanted me actually to be the CEO of Eskom, not to be the chairman. So I had to say no to that, but still offer myself to be part of the board. So yeah. So I reflected on it. I thought it is something that I can do. I don't want to be complaining on the outside when I feel that I've got skills that could support and be part of the team that turn around Eskom.
Reflecting on the journey to this point, talk to me about some of the low points, Mteto.
Yeah, I would say the low points for me has been there are a number of them. One is when we got into Eskom, and as we got deeper into trying to understand what are the challenges that were facing Eskom, so we had to certainly go and engage with various layers of management, not just senior management. And when we started to do that, although we were very clear that we're not going to be crossing the governance line, we were doing this thing because we wanted to have a better appreciation what the problem was. It was not taken kindly by the leadership at the time of Eskom. So that was the first thing for me. And then when we were still doing all of that, there was then a resignation of our CEO. Clearly, we were just maybe 6 weeks into the job. He resigned, our CEO. And then the next one, the big one, was when Mpo Makwana, who was our chairman, when I joined the board, he also resigned. All of these were big things that we as a board had to navigate through and make sure that we remain focused on what we were asked to do. And I'm glad that, in fact, most of those challenges helped us to be stronger.
You've spoken a lot about tough love. Your mother taught you tough love, which is about accountability, but also about driving performance. Talk to me a little about how you brought that culture to Eskom.
So as we put together what we now is referred to as the Generation Recovery Plan, this is something that South Africa, we always have plans. There's no shortage of plans in our country. The challenge, though, is how to execute those plans. I remember the late Pravin Gordon asking me the question, okay, Mteto, what is it that is going to be different with regards to this plan? Because we've had many plans. I said, our focus on execution. There's somebody who once said that you must trust but verify, and we can sit here and think that, okay, in 2 years' time, management is going to execute this, or we can put together mechanisms and structures that will monitor and make sure that things are done when they're expected to be done. And when people maybe we should have difficult conversations with people, we need to have those conversations. Let's not wait until we realize it's too late. There was also tough love, not necessarily from me, but driven from the board, to saying that there are some people who were not suited for their jobs in generation. So we changed a significant number of leaders in generation. All of that is not easy. It's really not easy, but you have to do it in order to make sure that you instill the discipline that's required. Eskom is an engineering company. You need to do things in line with standard operating procedures, and if you choose now to come up with your own things, you are going to find yourself in a difficult situation. So we had to do a lot of tough love.
Early on, you identified the key problem as not being operational or infrastructure orientated, but rather about, as you're saying now, around leaders and managers not fulfilling their obligations.
Mm. Indeed, we often, when we are diagnosing a problem, we quickly get into technical things like, it's the equipment, but most of the time it's the culture. It's the culture of the organization that is a problem. And I think it was Peter Drucker who once said that culture will eat strategy for breakfast. I agree with him, because you can have the best strategy, but if the culture is not conducive, you won't be able to be successful. Hence, we focused on culture. We focused on leadership. There were managers that were not managing. There were leaders that were not leading. And for me, when I look at that, I look at the analogy of at home, when we're talking about parents that are not parenting. You know what is going to be happening in that home. It was exactly the same thing here. You need to do, people, when they say that they are going to do something, they need to do that thing, and that's it. If people are not coming to work, or they're not applying themselves, there needs to be consequences. Hence, we came up with motivated to the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Public Enterprise at the time, that we need to reinstate the performance scheme, bonus scheme. But tying directly to whether people are doing what they are expected to do. Instead of having what I would call, everybody, you are treating them at the same level, at the same way. No, you need to differentiate based on whether people are performing. That's what we did to change the culture.
So Peter Drucker also famously said, if you can measure something, you can manage it. And it sounds as though that's exactly what you've brought into your performance management.
Exactly. I mean, everything was tied back to the drivers. What is it that we're trying to achieve over the next 3 years? And then we unpack all of that to come up with key performance indicators for each one of those. You drive them throughout the organization, starting from the CEO to his exco, then they cascade it down throughout the organization. Everything is linked to what we're trying to accomplish. And of course, people that do not apply themselves, they do not get anything. And in some cases, we had to manage people out of the organization. We never like to do that, but if it is required, we do it. And that is what Dan, together with his team, did.
Now, Mteto, I'm really fascinated with boards across the board, not only in South Africa, but globally. And I love this element that you are introducing, which is the 25% rotational, where you keep that, if I understand correctly, the strategy is to keep your board alive, to keep it innovating, ignited with new energy. Can you talk to me a little around that philosophy? And also, sir, whether you think that that is going to have traction more broadly in the South African business sphere, because I think it could be something that is seriously lacking at this point.
Yes. So, Bronwyn, when I look at 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, when this board was brought to come and fix Eskom, the big problem at the time was load shedding. But things changed. 3 years later, we no longer, energy security is not the problem now. We need to be thinking about how do we make Eskom sustainable? How do we make, enable Eskom to participate in renewable energies? How do we also drive down costs within the business? So engineers may have been the most relevant 3.5 years ago to have a majority of people on the board being engineers. But going forward, it's not the case. That is why you have to continue to be looking at ways and means of freshening up the board, bringing the relevant skills to tackle the challenges of the moment. Our challenges right now is to make sure that we deliver to South Africa energy that is affordable. And it requires a lot of people that understand finance and understand how to break down the costs, measure those costs, and remove costs out of the equation. It also requires people that are able to run projects that we have to do 14,000 kilometers of transmission lines and managing those large scale projects and how to finance those is something that is critical. So if you now have a board that is not so clued up around that, you are going to have a problem. The board is not going to be able to provide the value to management because management look to us. They look to us for guidance and coaching and support. And if we're unable to go and represent them to the various stakeholders that are there, it's going to be a problem. So yes, we need to every our term is 3 years. We put in front of our minister that we need to freshen up the board, and he has done actually more than what we had what we had given them. He has changes, and that is fine. That is what is required.
But he's definitely not letting you go.
No, look, because my term started a year later. You remember, Pomakwana served for a year, so I started. So my year finishes in September this year. So I hope it's going to allow me to go and do what I need to go and do. There are many things to do. Eskom is stable now.
Well,
we've got great leadership. We've got great board.
I believe I may be having a conversation with you at that time and seeing whether they are willing to let you go. I have my doubts about that, but we'll cross that bridge at a later stage. Let's talk a little more about your involvement in the early days, right at the ground level. You don't often see a non-executive chairman walking the floor, so to speak, and you were speaking to the individuals on the ground that were
Yes.
involved in actually making the engine of Eskom work.
Yes. So the beauty of what happened in Eskom at that time was that we set up a committee called Business Operations Performance Committee. It's a committee that's looking at operations, and I was asked to chair that committee. And it was a committee largely composed of engineers. So we said to ourselves, we cannot just assume that we know what the problems are. We have to engage. For example, the first weekend, we decided to have a workshop brought all of our power station general managers. We said, guys, come up to Johannesburg. Let's sit down. What the hell is the problem? Let's cut all of, let us understand what is the problem. You should not be afraid about anything here. This is a safe space that we have created, but we need to know. What came out of that was really, really enlightening to us. Then we moved from that, we started to visit the different power stations to start to verify some of the things that were said during that workshop. And we got even more information about what was going on. And that helped us to be able to put together a case when we're saying to both South Africa, to the president and to the minister that here is a 2-year plan. It was a plan that was anchored on buy-in from the ground. And that's very important. Sometimes we just come up with these plans, but if you're not engaging, testing, and incorporating the ideas of the people on the ground, you are going to be having a problem. In our case, the employees of Eskom actually owned the plan. It was not our plan. Then there was another situation where I was involved in recruitment. We hardly have a board that is involved in, but we were looking for someone to execute this plan, to drive this plan? Who is going to be the leader in Eskom to do that? So I was sitting in these committees and evaluating candidates, and we decided, no, man, we're actually wasting our time, because the candidates that were being given were not talking to the problems that we managed to understand. Now these are the problems. Look at the candidate, look at the problems. No, there's no alignment. We said, no, we need actually someone internally who understands deeply Eskom. And it was the people on the ground who said to me, Mteto, there's a guy called Becky Ngamalo. Go and have a discussion with him. And Becky, it was not an easy discussion, but we were able to get him over the line to take the job. And he did a fantastic job. He's the one who owned the plan, executed, made all of the changes that were required, and our job was to support him.
And Dan Murakani, can you explain the relationship between you and him?
Yes. Okay. Maybe let me start by there was a little bit of a time lag between our generation recovery plan. It was approved in March 2023, and we were appointed from April Becky to drive that. Dan joined us a year later in February. And we had done a long search to try and find the right person to do this thing. And we understood what the problems were. Dan was the perfect person for this job. He understood Eskom. He had been in Eskom. He left Eskom because he did not want to be part of corruption. So from an ethics standpoint, he ticked that box. He is someone who I would say that he's got both the head, the heart, and hands. You need those three things in Eskom. You need to really, really connect with the people, but you need to be smart. You need to be smart, and also when it is required, you need to be able to roll up your sleeves. He's able to do that, and he hit the ground running in February 2024. He hit the ground running, and we gave him. You've got 90 days. 90 days, you need to look at the plan, change that plan if you need to. But from now onwards, this is your plan. It's not a Becky plan. It's your plan. And he drove that plan, and he's done a great job since then.
Mteto, I'm sure lots of people ask you this because it appears that everything is very calm within the Eskom stable. How do you reflect on André de Ruyter's time? I'm sure you are asked that question.
Look, my sense is that what we picked up, Bronwyn, as we were engaging with the staff, we found that the staff, they knew what needed to be done. But then you had the leaders who understood the problem in a different way. For example, their problem statement was, we've got an aging fleet. We need to retire this fleet. And as a country, we need to accelerate private sector coming up with renewables. That was the narrative coming from the leaders. But immediately you are engaging with employees, they were telling, there is no such a thing as an aging equipment. We are engineers. We also we came in and said, we do not understand that there's this thing. If you do not maintain something, it's going to break. But then it's not about shutting that down. It's about making sure that you fix it, put aside the money to do that. And clearly his approach, if I fast forward that approach, I wonder where we would be now. We would really be in trouble because we would not have maintained the power stations. It would have continued. If you look at renewables, they are way behind schedule. If you look at the renewables that should be now supporting, only 50% are online out of the 100% that should have been there. So there are delays there. We would be in serious trouble as a country. So I'm glad that the changes happened because and sanity prevailed. We were able to focus on maintaining what we have and driving the discipline and bringing back the pride to the people of Eskom. Because that's another thing. When they were listening to what was being said by their leaders about them, there was no motivation at all, because somehow it's like there's this bunch of people that were, not ethical, were not applying themselves, so that is another problem that we found. Now, a sense of pride, really, and committed, and wanting to go the extra mile. And that's what you need in an environment like an Eskom.
Every now and again, you see a headline coming to fruition. They're few and far between, but there are those headlines that insinuate that 2029, we may be in for another round of load shedding. How do you respond to those headlines and those detractors to Eskom's sustainability?
Look, I think we are really we know that it comes with the territory, and there are going to be people that are going to continue to be questioning what we are doing, and in our view, we need to do two things. One, we continue to drive the renewable agenda, both within Eskom and from the IPPs, to bring in more and more renewables so that we have the capacity. Secondly, within Eskom, the reason why they're talking about the energy cliff is that there is an assumption that there will be power stations that are going to be going offline because we'll be retiring those. But we have made a decision within Eskom that our priority, the issue is not coal. Coal is not the problem. Emissions is the problem. So our collective energy within Eskom is to reduce emissions so that when we reach that point, we are way below the standards that have been set. And to do that, we are partnering with countries that have gone the similar route. We are learning from the South Koreans, we are learning from the Japanese, from the Chinese, how they did. It's called HELE. High efficiency. You need to improve the efficiency of your coal-fired power station, and you reduce emissions, low emissions, HELE. That's the program that we are driving within Eskom, and we are passionate. We've got smart people, and they get it, and we don't see a problem. The key is to execute, though, on the renewables agenda. I think it's very important that IPPs should be delivering in line with the expectations.
And that's something in terms of many saying Eskom's relationship with the private sector is questioned. Do you believe that you are collaborating appropriately with the private sector, especially when it comes to independent power producers?
Look, I think most of this is really people, again, who are a bit far from the action here. And if you were to talk to some of the IPPs who have come to us and said that some of the reasons why we are delaying is because we just do not have the expertise nor the capacity to do this, can we work with you? When we announced Eskom Green, you would think that from the IPPs, they will be looking at it as a competition. They're looking at it as something where we can work together. So we are actually collaborating with the private sector around Eskom Green, because, of course, we need to be taking care of our balance sheet. Our balance sheet is not that strong. In order for us to achieve our ambitions, we need to think outside the box. Thinking outside the box, it means working with others. That's where we're working with them there, and they have invited us to work with them in their own projects. So that's what you see from the outside. But there is something, of course, Bronwyn, that we need to all be clear about. When we're talking about an environment that is conducive for investment, we say that we need to respect law and order. We all get that. This is something that is non-negotiable. Even in our case, when we feel that our rights are being threatened, just because we happen to be big, It doesn't mean that we cannot go to courts and say, hey, we are being challenged here. There's something wrong that is being done, and we have exercised that right to go to courts, and we have won many, many times. The reason why we're going to the courts when it comes to the traders is because we feel that the rules of playing are not level. Some rules applying to us, it's like we are playing with your hands tied at the back, and then they are free to do this. Say, no, we need to play on a level playing field. Let's finalize the rules first. This is how we're going to be playing, and let's go play. Let's have the competition. So that is really why we felt that, no, people are going to just be picking some of our big clients just because we have got certain responsibilities and they do not have that. We need to have a NESA that is coming up with rules that are leveling the playing fields. That is all that we want. It's not like we've got a board here and a management team that has embraced competition, that has embraced the fact that we need to open up this market. This market has to be opened up for South Africa to drive down the cost. It has to be. But it doesn't mean that Eskom should be killed, because anyone who thinks that by killing Eskom, you are actually helping South Africa, that is very short-sighted. You need a strong Eskom in the future.
Mteto, I want to move now, and I know we're running out of time, but to the political spectrum for South Africa. You have said that we have lost our non-political alignment. If the terminology I'm using is correct, we've perhaps sided, maybe I can throw in a couple more phrases here, that we are siding with the wrong political players. Would that be fair interpretation of your statements?
That would not be a fair. What I was saying is that we've got a position which is a non-aligned position. And that's a good position to take for a country like ours, because we should always be looking at what is of national interest. And that may mean one day we're aligning with this, another with aligning with that. We should be driven by national interest. But in doing so, in the actions that we take, we should be worried, we should be concerned when some of our actions are creating the perception that we are non-aligned. We should always be careful of that. In fact, we should protect the non-aligned position with everything that we have, because that is
in other words,
a
neutral position. We should hold a neutral position.
Stay with that position, stay with that. And if there are people who seem to be excited to be moving in whichever direction and to the detriment of the national interest, bring those people back in line, because the position of the country is clear. It has always been clear, but some of the behaviors may be interpreted to be behaviors that are being selective. And so that's what I'm saying. We need to be clear. Our actions must be aligned with our stated position.
If you had the opportunity to go into the GNU now and give it clear direction, what would you do?
Yeah, look, I come from the private sector, and we like to simplify things in the private sector. You don't want to do thousands of things. You want to do a few things and do those things well. I'll do really just three things. The first is, as GNU, we need to take a position. All key positions in the country, whether it's state-owned enterprises, whether it's hospitals, whether it is municipalities, I don't care. Or all key positions, let's put the best person for the job, for those positions. Merit, key. Leadership matters. If you look at what has happened in Eskom, it's all about the leadership of Dan and his team. It's leadership. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we continue to say, hey, we are inviting people to come and invest in our country, but practically, when you look at it, we are not the most friendly country when it comes to business. So let's remove all of the blockages. Let's remove all of the things that are making it difficult to do business in our country. The last thing is law and order. So those will be the three things. But to get to that, it's not going to be easy. You need to have the different partners in GNU debating, discussing, fighting up until there is only one agenda for that GNU, not an agenda for DA, an agenda for ANC. Everybody's competing in the different. No, we need one national agenda. So that would be the thing. I would put everybody. If it takes 2 months to get to that position, so be it. It's the time worth investing in, because after that, everybody in the GNU will be aligned to one thing. The president is going to, when he's having difficult conversations with them, is the only reference point is this one key agenda. Right now, everybody is doing their own thing. It's like competition within GNU. It will never take us anywhere as a country. So I would put one agenda around those 3 things and hold the leaders accountable around each one of those.
Some tough love, I hear, needed in the
Yes.
GNU there. You've been incredibly generous with your time. To those young potential leaders of the future watching this conversation right now, who aspire to be the next Mteto Nyati, what word of advice would you like to leave them with?
Yeah. So I would say maybe 2 things, Bronwyn. One is, I remember way back when I was doing some work at Afrox, as a junior engineer, and building that foundation. It may appear that foundation, when you are in overalls as an engineer, we want to be leaders, but we do not understand that you need to have that very strong foundation from which you can build your career on. So don't rush too quickly. Don't rush. Build the necessary understanding. Wherever you have been put in terms of the job, try and understand that before you move on to the next, because you are building that solid foundation. That's from where then you are going to be able to spring from. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, be yourself. I'm not trying to be anybody. I'm just me with all of my problems. But the more you are aligning and leveraging who you are, doing the things that come naturally to you, the more you're going to be able to stand out, And I know we all want all of these role models, but the secret is to go inside. And you have been given everything that you need in order for you to be successful. Listen to your gut, listen. And if you leverage that, you focus on your strengths, invest more and more on your strengths than trying to eliminate your weaknesses, because the better returns that you'll get is in honing your strengths, because that is something that is going to differentiate you out there.
Mteto, thank you for sharing your advice. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you here on the Executive Exchange on Moneyweb TV. Mteto Nyati is the chairman of Eskom and the chairman and founder of BSG.